Oy vey.
You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Oh my God. I just read they're arguing on X, and Jim and I were just talking offline. I said that I'm not going to continue to argue on X any longer. Not that I won't post. I'm just not going to get into long drawn out debates. But a guy just now, they're arguing about ethics, and this guy says there is no valuation. It's ethics. How do you, that's the problem, is how do you even argue against it? I mean, you have to go so far back to fundamentals. And that's why I don't want to get into arguments, because I just don't have the time nor the inclination to try to teach people from the ground up, especially when there's an abundance of books out there that already do this.
Yes, I agree.
I mean?
You know, as an egoist, I think you're doing the right thing. But you're constantly self-assessing like that. One of your great virtues, Michael, is that you're constantly assessing what you're doing, why you're doing it. You know, that is the hallmark of the moral individual. It really is. Constantly reassessing. Did I do that right? Is there some way I could have improved? Am I wasting my time? Is this really in my selfish interest? And I think on those, when you ask yourself those hard questions, engaging and getting upset and getting furious about them,
right there.
That's the problem. If you want to make a statement to the world at large, because it's not the person that we're arguing with, it's the passersby, it's the audience out there might get a new perspective from, but I can't answer every asshole out there. I can't answer every fallacy out there. And if I'm getting upset at him, then suddenly I've dropped the ball. I've lost sight of the real goal, which was to make a point to the world at large.
And, some of them are just so rude. And I've said this before. For the libertarians out there, and it's by no means all, I'm going to be interviewing on Wednesday Sheldon Richman, who is an absolute prince of a man. And I asked him on my show, we're going to discuss our political differences. And I didn't couch it as a debate because I don't want to debate him. And he said, okay, I'll do that, because he doesn't want to debate. He doesn't want it to be adversarial. We're just going to discuss our differences from top to bottom. And I think that's a good discussion. But these libertarians online who like to antagonize people and then cry non-aggression, there's something so disgustingly cowardly about that. I believe in non-aggression because I think it's correct, right? Therefore, even when I'm angry and even when I'm inclined to want to resort to aggression, I won't do it. I don't, though, go around antagonizing people, calling their wives whores, and then when they want to punch me in my mouth, say, oh, non-aggression. I just think that's disgusting. But I forgot to do a whole bunch of things. I forgot to give the disclaimer that we're in no way associated with the American Capitalist Party. I forgot to say that I've got a great interview out right now with an entrepreneur on the Rational Egoist, in addition to my great interview with the great Jim Valliant from a few days ago. 2:30 today, as always, join me on Everyday Ethics. And we've got questions already. It's Open Question Friday. And don't forget, we have super fucking chats and super fucking stickers. And also, I'm going to do it again because I love them. Don't forget to check out Rosie Ginsburg. Just don't do it live. You don't want to do it when you're competing with this show. But go check out the reruns. It's great. Rosie's wonderful. Robert Naser asked a beautiful question. What is the morally correct number of pencils to own? How many dolls should a girl have? If 2 is the correct answer, per the philosopher Trump, how did we ever manage before he arrived? So when it comes to pencils, I would say probably 1. When that pencil gets low, I think you might be able to replace it. Have one on the burner, just so, but now see, that's the problem. Even if you have that one, you need another one in case that one breaks. Maybe your sharpener's on the fritz. That's going to be a tough one. I think the thing to do here is to go to philosopher King Trump, and he will solve all our issues for us. Jim, what say you?
That question reveals exactly what is wrong with politics today. It's no one's effing business how many pencils you have, how many dolls you have. What the hell? I mean, obviously, I think it would be foolish to if you use pencils. Depends on your use of pencils. Depends
I
on
hate
your
writing with
context.
pencils, by the way. I don't like the
Okay,
feel.
what
I
is
like
your-
the feel of a pen.
That's
I don't
it.
like the pencil drags. You don't notice that?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, I hate it. No, I like a nice smooth pen.
Well, sometimes you need a pen. Sometimes you need a pencil because you want to make erasures. Sometimes, and so what is your relative need for pen versus pencil? How many pencils do you use in the course of a day? I mean, that's an individualized thing depending on your circumstances, surely. And if a girl is into dolls and has a massive doll collection, what's that to anybody else? I don't want the advice of a politician on any of that. Thank you very much. Nor do I
good.
think it's subject to a fixed moral principle. Certainly not a fixed number with any moral principles. That's absurd.
Well, I forgot. Persephone pointed out to me, she just wanted to make me look bad, I think, that also we have the Self-Made Soul tomorrow with Mark. And on Sunday, we're doing a discussion on Israel, Mark and I, assuming Mark shows up. It's always, I'm sure he'll be there. I kid. Yes, pencils, it's a visceral experience. I can't believe nobody else notices the difference. You can't tell the difference. If you were blindfolded and somebody gave you a pen to write with and somebody gave you a pencil to write with, you couldn't tell the difference?
I could probably tell the difference just by the feel of it.
Well, I got this right here. This here is a pencil no, this isn't it. I had something over here. I don't know what the hell happened to it, but it was a pencil that is in the guise of a pen, and you hit the button, it jacks up the thing. But so you couldn't tell just by feeling the thing.
Pens,
Yeah, but you would know when you wrote with it. I'm convinced of that. Do we have any more questions here? But yeah, check out Self-Made Soul. Check out you should be, look, we've got it up here now, the Capitalist Corner, www.thecapitalistcorner.org. We've got patreon.com/the Capitalist Corner. It's right there on the screen. Jim, what is the point of the www?
World Wide Web?
No. I know what it means, but why put it? We don't need to enter it when you do it. Like I'm over superfluous letters.
You have to take it up with, that's above my pay grade, Michael. You're going to have to take it up with the powers that be behind the internet itself.
Well, since we have somewhat of a lazy audience today that is not coming with an abundance of questions, and I don't mean to insult the audience, but it's what's happening right now. I got to find, let's see. Oh, this is all to Jim Valliant. All right. I want to go over some of these articles, Jim, and see what your thoughts are this. Okay, so this the skipper tank that was seized by the U.S., which I thought it was initially reported it was a Venezuelan ship, and I was critical of the Trump administration for doing it. But now they're claiming that for at least 80 days over the past 2 years, this has been engaged in spoofing, a practice of falsifying location data in violation of treaties. It's also in violation of various restrictions we have on Russia, on Iran. It's owned by this corporation, which the U.S. says is run by a Russian oil magnate. So in this case, now, I don't know. This is all assuming. I'm going to assume, which is probably not safe for the sake of argument, that the administration is telling the truth about this. And in that case, I will say I could see an argument for the legitimacy of the move. The problem is, when I read it yesterday, is that they lie so much, they're involved in so many things they shouldn't be doing, that it seemed ridiculous that they would go seize this Venezuelan oil ship. And that kind of is the problem, right, Jim? That when you are dishonest, when you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing, it's like the boy that cried wolf. Then people don't want to believe you, even when the wolf comes.
Yeah. Tell us what you're doing, Mr. President. At a very minimum, tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it. There are times, of course, when they have to keep secrets, they're not going to tell us when a surprise attack is going to happen in a war, for example. For national security reasons, they might need to. But I don't see that here. I mean, they're seizing a tanker, which is in violation of oil sanctions laws, in effect. And I can see that if there's a blockade of Iran. I could see them seizing oil from Venezuela. Absolutely. The oil's coming from Venezuela. The ship, who the hell knows where that ship came from? But you do have the respect for the people to tell us the truth. Now, perhaps Mr. Trump is used to people just nodding yes and accepting whatever he'll do and taking him on faith. I can see, Michael, that you're not the kind of person that takes politicians, especially Mr. Trump, on faith.
No.
And so
I take Jim Valliant on faith, nobody else.
Yeah. Well, you put your finger on the issue, is trusting the guy. That's why trust is a value. There's a moral value. And the only thing that can buy trust is honesty. And the more open and honest I am with you, there's a relationship between that and how much people will trust me. Isn't that funny? It's a non-accidental relationship between the high value that trust is and the price that it takes to earn it, which is honesty. Consistent, principled honesty is the only thing that will actually buy someone's rational trust. And that is, of course, the problem. Now, you're right. You can come up with I can understand this theoretically, and I have no problem with it. If we're engaged, in a blockade with a dictatorship, I think it's appropriate sometimes to blockade aggressive dictatorships. I have no problem with that, especially if it, spares us worse. Let's put it that way. I got no problem with that. So theoretically, you're right. But
you look very nice today, by the way.
Do I?
Well, you've got such a statesman-like look to you, Jim.
Well,
Persephone's nodding yes.
It's this poise,
yeah,
intelligence that you're seeing. Yeah, it just comes off me like
Yes. We should post a picture of you rolling around in that chair at the Science Museum. That would really illustrate the maturity that we have.
Yeah. If you don't, never lose the child inside of you. If you stop the quest to play and just have fun, then it's a sad life. Then I don't want to live inside your head.
Somebody said to me yesterday, objectivists have a reputation for being humorless. I said, then they've never hung around with me, Jim Valliant, Mark Pellegrino, Robert Nasser, Andy Bernstein,
or Leonard Peikoff.
Or Leonard. I haven't hung around with him enough.
That man just wants to have fun until. See, humor has been a big part of our relationship over the decades. I have to come prepared every time with jokes. He expects it of me. He expects humor from me. So I have to line up jokes, look on the internet for humor, and come in and tell him a couple of jokes. And he always busts up, and he expects it. He loves it.
We got some questions here.
Yes,
one
sir.
actually has to do. It's not to do with the article we read, but it's what's the word I'm looking for, Jim? It's when something's contiguous, when something's related by blood. I forget. Whatever. It's related to the article that we read about Nick Fuentes, and the author of the article was saying in the Daily Economy, this is not traditional conservatism. Now, here's the problem. Now, the question that Ian Gilmore asked is, did you read Rod Dreher's article in the Free Press where he blames the rise of Nick Fuentes on the left? No, I did not see that. But here's the thing. I get what the author of the article we read was saying about conservatism. The problem is when you base your principles on faith in what already happens to exist, it's very difficult to not. At what point, I guess, do you principally oppose these guys? I agree wholeheartedly. Nick Fuentes is not in the camp of Reagan, Goldwater, William F. Buckley Jr., or even Edmund Burke. I agree with that. But while I understand the point about the left antagonizing people and driving them in a certain direction, the direction that takes is dictated, or I don't want to say dictated, certainly influenced by the philosophy and the positions that are already there. And when you have conservatism which, I mean, you could go back and look at Friedrich Hayek wrote an essay, Why I'm Not a Conservative, and Ayn Rand's devastating assault on conservatism and conservatism, an obituary in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. It's hard for me to say when people have seen this coming that it isn't an outgrowth of it, right?
It is absolutely what Ayn Rand put her finger right on it, and as early as the 1940s. The right, the intellectual right, had died with the rise of socialism in the early decades of the 20th century. By the 1930s, we have what's called the Red Decade, when the editor of the New York Times, in the New York Times book review,
Did you know him?
Granville Hicks.
No. Did you know him?
No, I did not know Granville Hicks, who was the literary editor of the New York Times Book Review in the 1930s. No, I didn't know Henry Hazlitt, who was the financial and economics editor at the New York Times at the same time. But the literary editor at the place said one cannot be a proper author without first being a proper communist. And America's intellectuals were there was a handful, Mencken and Hazlitt, I've mentioned them really, of American, Isabel Patterson maybe, emerging Rose Wilder Lane. So there's a small handful of right-wing intellectuals in the 1930s, truly, just a handful. By the 1940s, and the opening of the Cold War and the fear now of communism opened up anti-communism as a, important value for Americans. And so right-wing intellectuals began to get their act together. But what we were talking about the other day, fusionism and Frank Meyer, William Buckley trying to have tradition and religion, and even defenders of European, nobility and aristocracy, and try and integrate that with classical liberalism. Cannot be done. You have your choice, ladies and gentlemen. If the tradition of America is classical liberalism, you get fused in their mind. They get confused. Well, tradition, therefore, is a value. No. The revolution that was America, the intellectual revolution that made America possible, the radical secularizing development that is the First Amendment, no established religion. See, it is inconsistent. You cannot have your Christianity and your altruism and your tradition. What did Ayn Rand call it? The
God, family, country swamp.
That's it. The God, family, tradition swamp, something like that. And they can't integrate the two. But Buckley tried. Frank Meyer tried. A lot of Buckley's friends, as I've pointed out, were ex-communists. They never got classical liberalism. They never understood it all the way down. Even those who were influenced, by Mises or Hazlitt, to be converted, there's a whole long list of ex-communists and socialists who populated the intellectual right in the last half of the 20th century. There were radicals in the New Left, like David Horowitz or something, who became moved to the right. There's the neocons, bunch of former Trotskyites who take up the cause against the Soviet Union and become the whole neocon movement. No, a lot of the right-wing intellectual movement of the last half of the 20th century was populated by a bunch of communists who never got classical liberalism anyway. And then there's another factor. The left keeps calling you a fascist. You're a fascist, you're a fascist, you're a fascist. And there are some people who are sort of weak-minded and sort of say, okay, if that's fascism, then I guess I'm a fascist. And so off they go defending authoritarianism. And we have a bunch. We have Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes. What are they? They're overtly doing sympathetic treatments. You know how Tucker Carlson will say Putin's Russia is a much better country than the United States. Or Nick Fuentes will say, Stalin wasn't such a bad guy. Why don't we just admit he's the best politician who ever lived, who slaughtered millions and millions of people, starved, millions of people on purpose. Whole villages disappeared from Ukraine and Russia under Stalin. But of course, if you're being called a fascist dictator anyway, see, these people are reacting emotionally. The only answer here is ideology, is philosophy. Get your philosophy straight and consistent with reality. And therefore, they'll accept I'm a capitalist. Okay, now you're a capitalist who what? Who wants tariffs, who wants tough antitrust enforcement, who wants Trump to buy companies, get a share stake in corporations. No. You're not a capitalist. And that's the thing. When Ayn Rand defines capitalism, the title of her book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, she defines it like a classical liberal would. And you can't stop that. If you hesitate in that way, you've given the whole case up. There was a question you had the other day that was really fascinating. Who's more to blame, the outright socialists who embrace the term socialist, or those on the right who advocate socialist policies and call it capitalism? what does more damage to the idea of capitalism? Well, they're both, as you point out, doing horrific damage, and sometimes it's hard to tell. But if we're just considering these right-wingers, they are causing untold damage, intellectual damage to the minds of young people who will associate capitalism with socialist solutions. Fascism is the result, is what that you're going to get. Just like on the left, even if they say, well, I'm a democratic socialist, what is that? A kind of fascism.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jim. I thought you were done. Okay. We have a super fucking chat from Gary Menard, and he asked what I think is a good question, although I think he missed something at the beginning. But he said, in the case of children, in demonstrable abuse, starving a child or locking it in a closet for years, how would a proper government protect the individual rights of children? So my answer is easy. You go arrest the parents and put them in prison. But I will say this, Jim. I will say this. I do believe in objectivism. There is a gap when it comes to the rights of children. And I don't want, it's hard to get in because I don't want to go too deep into the weeds because this is a show about capitalism, not in-depth philosophy. But in essence, morality comes into play because individuals have the freedom of choice, and we have to discover how to survive, right? Our lives are limited. We always have an alternative to life and death. We have to choose life, and we have to choose to discover those things that keep us alive. So the choice element is key, right? But and rights are an outgrowth of morality. But when it comes to children, obviously, in the case of an infant, for instance, they don't have the capacity of choice. They don't have the capacity of free will. So how do we ascribe rights to them? I think it's a good question. It might actually. My answer to you, Gary, is you lock the son of a bitch up who's done that. That's my answer. But Jim, this might be worthy of one of our shows. This might actually, because this is a long discussion about the rights of children.
It is. Obviously, they have a right not to be murdered, physically harmed in any way. And anyone doing that is violating someone's rights. It doesn't matter whether I'm, let's say I get into a traffic accident and I have a horrible brain injury and I really can't take care of myself. A guardian is appointed for me. They're the ones who really have the right to consent as my proxy on my behalf. Children are in the same situation, in effect. Let's put it that way. Their parents are their proxy choosers, because we say they do not have a fully formed rational capacity, volitional capacity yet. They're below the age of consent. Once they've reached the, quote, age of consent, that is, they can make up their own minds, make their own decisions, then that should terminate. But until that time happens, the parents, in effect, get to exercise some coercive force themselves. That coercive force still cannot violate their own child's right. And where do we draw that line? I think it has to be physical. That is to say, why do I oppose the ban on social media for teenagers in Australia? That's the parents' job.
Yeah.
When it comes to educational things, it is, or even psychological things, I'll go that broadly. It really is up to the parent, because the government can't really impose an ideology. There has to be, at least to a certain extent, a significant, what is the First Amendment when it says no establishment of religion? It says the government can't have a sectarian philosophy, in effect. I very much agree with that idea. And if you attempt to impose things like an internet restriction, you're interfering with the parents' right to raise their child the way they want to. But they have the right to take the phone away from the child, say you don't get to be on the internet until you're such and such an age, or there's limited times. Once you become a teenager, I'm going to limit your, that's parenting. That's good parenting. And what we do is we use the state. It was the paternalism. Where does the idea come from? Papa state is what it's saying. Well, the state is not my daddy, okay? And I'm not the state's child, in effect. And we should reject the idea of the state controlling any of this. But when it comes to physical harm for the child, now the state can come in. And even if it's just a clear case of negligent harm, the state can come in and protect the child physically. When it comes to their psychological, moral, intellectual development, I'm afraid the state has got to be hands off.
There's some questions here that I want to get to, but we also have a super fucking chat that we have to get to. So I'm going to answer these questions relatively quickly. My answer in no way implies that James agrees with me.
My face is such that people will see what
they'll know. But I'm just saying we can't get into a long, drawn out discussion.
Understood.
So Race Jacobson, whom I love, he says, referring to when I said there's a gap in objectivism when it comes to children's rights, he says the gap is not in objectivism itself, but rather the knowledge developed in this area by objectivists. And I would just say, well, I don't know the difference. Ayn Rand is the creator, the originator, and the elucidator of the philosophy of objectivism. She didn't address it. If she didn't address it, it's just not there. That is just, that's just fact. There is no objectivism out there with this element of it in there waiting to be discovered. Objectivism is a specific philosophy created by a specific person. And if she didn't address something in it, that is not in objectivism.
It's obviously not objectivism. Just one line. Objectivism does not have a full-blown philosophy of law. And what Ayn Rand or Leonard Peikoff would do is they would punt when it became a detailed matter like this, and they'd say,
absolutely.
Well,
this belongs to the philosophy of law. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the application of the principle of rights. And in every case, it's not obvious. It really isn't. Where is the force? Who is the force initiator? We need a whole philosophy of law for that.
Right. Okay. So now Mr. Deagle says, well, you don't just pop into existence out of nowhere. You have to grow up to get to the point where you can make choices. Yes. Now, so he may not be aware of this. So this is where my take on this goes when you get to children's rights. Ayn Rand's argument against abortion was that you cannot confuse a potentiality with an actuality, that a baby in utero is a potential human life, not an actual human life. So it doesn't have rights. So if you're going to say that an infant has potential rights because when it grows up, it will have rights, you're committing the error that she said earlier. And I don't know how that you can get around this. My way around it is I don't just go for her point about potentialities and actualities. I actually, and objectivists are probably going to want to excommunicate me for this one, but I actually think that Murray Rothbard made the strongest argument I've ever come across for legalized abortion. And that is that regardless of whether you say that a child in utero has rights, nobody has the right to live as a parasite on somebody else's body. And that logic, I find I cannot get around.
Let's combine the two. The fetus is not an independent entity. That's true. And that sort of combines both of the ideas until the baby is born and is a separate thing from the mother. Once it is a separate thing from the mother, now it's no longer necessarily a parasite on the mother. See, it's a different kind of potential once it becomes so anyone else.
That's an interesting argument.
Anyone else can take up the job of parenting at that point. And in fact, getting back to the question of what do you do to a physical abuse, you take the child out of that context first.
But then the issue, Jim, isn't pure.
But you get those kids away.
But then the issue isn't just potentiality; it's a specific type of potentiality, which I'm okay. I mean.
Let me add the qualifier. It's an independent potentiality at that point, who can be parented by someone else.
See, I like that. I think it's a good argument. But to get back to Race's point, Jim's clarification then does not become objectivism.
No,
right? But I think that's key. No, because the thing is that people seem to think that if you believe in if you say objectivism is closed, you therefore think that knowledge is closed.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't mean that Ayn Rand was right. It doesn't mean she answered every question. It just means that objectivism is the answers that she gave to specific questions.
With your help, Mr. Liebowitz, I am struggling to create an objectivist-friendly theory of law, theory of constitution.
I like how you put that.
In my own head.
Objectivist-friendly. I like that.
In my view, it's consistent with objectivism, but I don't make it objectivism. It ain't objectivism yet. Okay?
Right.
And it will never be. And it will never be. And you and I might have a disagreement about how to interpret the Constitution. And guess what? They both might be claiming to be consistent with objectivism. And it's up to you, gentle
Right.
reader,
And we both might be
listen.
wrong, by the way.
And we both might be wrong. But
Yeah.
it's up to each of us, to you, gentle listener or reader, to figure out what you think is consistent with reality, if that's really the first test, or whether it's consistent with objectivism, if you believe in objectivism. So
we have a super fucking chat from Robert Naser, who asked a question: have either of you ever officiated a wedding? If so, any tips for a first timer performing his first marriage ceremony besides have fun? Okay. I'm going to assume this question is really just for Jim, because I think it ought to be readily apparent that my 25 years in prison, I was not officiating weddings. So I guess I could have done one in the meantime, but I'm not a justice of the peace, a notary, or whatever, a priest.
Yeah. Well, you know what was interesting? I've officiated twice, Robert, and someone has asked me to do it again. So I think I'm going to do it a third time in my life. I'll be so privileged. And believe me, I regard it as one of the great honors and privileges of my life when a couple comes to me and asks me to officiate their wedding. You know, it happened once when I was a DX. I can get you. I know judges. I can get a judge for you. Don't you want a judge? I'm like, no. We want you. I mean, I start crying and hugging them. And you're really kidding. You know, and they'll give me this long background on why it's got to be you, Jim, that just puts me in another dimension of, I can't. And it's talk about I'm a sentimental fool. I'll start crying if I think about it in too much greater detail. So first tip, you got to get that emotion out of it, because I know you're going to be overwhelmed when you see them standing in front of you, because I have twice seen the couple standing in front of me with all their friends and family there.
And Jim's a crier. Let's just put it out there.
Boy, do I cry. I'm at the drop of a hat. So the first thing I had to do was get my act together and not be emotional, to take it solemnly and seriously. And remember, this is not me. This is them. This is their day. This is the way they want it. I will do what they want. Defer to them. If they have a script, you stick to their script. And believe me, it'll be one of the most moving experiences of your life, simply to do that for other people. I can't tell you how enriching it is. And in terms of what it means to me, in terms of my relationship with those people, it's beyond words. There are no words that can really fully adequately get your head around it when someone wants to bring you in and share their happiness in that sort of way. Okay, now I will start crying.
Okay.
But the first thing, hold in check that overwhelming emotion that you're going to feel, because you are going to feel it. But remember, it's their day. It's what they want, and do it the way they want it. That would be. Other than that, enjoy yourself. Be just like the person in the front row crying at the wedding. I know, Robert, we're going to talk about crying at weddings, and we'll have more. Is that the appropriate affect and all that? That could lead us down another rabbit hole. But believe me, I think that there are such things as tears of splendor when it comes to moments like that, or say the birth of someone's child. I mean, those are just overwhelming life moments. Accomplishing anything in life. When I finished my book, Creating Christ, the feel of it, it was like Howard Rourke in the Fountainhead touching the steel frame of his building. I was almost like making love to the book itself before.
Oh, no.
But it's true. You have this powerful feeling, once it's concretized, once it's in your hand.
You haven't actually done that, Jim, I hope.
I have not had sex with a book. No sexual feelings at all for books. But when I got the first hardback copy of Creating Christ, man, was that an overwhelming emotional experience. 30 plus years of work, gone in 1,000 books read, to arguments with discussions and engagements with professors and so forth. Over 30 years, finally.
What was the question in the Fountainhead to Howard Rourke? You make it seem like this is a combination of sexual ecstasy, Indian torture. I can't remember the exact line. And Rourke said, well, isn't it?
Isn't it? Isn't it?
The creator.
It's something like that. That is to say, I'm not going to say it's sexual. I'm not getting aroused. On the other hand, literally, but on the other hand, it is at that level of intensity. it's like, whoa, this is really serious business here. And so whether it's an achievement in life or a milestone in life, when my sister has babies, when a friend has a child, when I'm asked to officiate at someone's wedding, or even I'm just in the audience in someone's wedding, I'm just there to be a witness to it. It can be overwhelming, and we should let milestone moments. We should use ceremony and symbolism, going back to another discussion we had before. Use that so you can experience emotionally the full range of values at play and the importance of those values at play. I think that's really an important part of motivation and reward in life when those kind of things happen. It does say something, Robert, about you as a human being. And it makes perfect sense to me that someone would ask you to officiate at their wedding. Your emotional understanding, as well as your philosophical understanding, uniquely suits you to be able to integrate what's going on there for them. And if I translate it in all three cases where I've been asked to do it myself, that's what it is. They'll say, no, it's got to be you, Jim. I say, well, why me? And they'll give the answer. And the answer is, for them, it's an important part of the symbolism of that ceremony. And nothing could be more flattering, or in your case, more justly earned.
Robert, I think you got a great answer there. So Matt Gilbert has a question about something, but I want to say before I get to this question, because it reminds me of something. I've frequently come across this claim that Ayn Rand's Galt's Gulch was actually an example of anarcho-capitalism. Jim, we've got to do an episode to debunk that ridiculous claim. But so Matt Gilbert says, lately I've heard many objectivists advocating for open borders. Can you guys explain why that is when Rand's exemplary Society of Galt's Gulch had an extremely strict immigration policy? Okay. First of all, the context of Galt's Gulch, it was a private commune owned by Midas Mulligan. So that's the first thing. And well, I don't know about none, but nobody that actually understands objectivism is advocating for open borders into somebody's property or somebody's home. So that's the first key. Secondly, there's a big context in that they went there as a strategic reason. I mean, it was a very complex plan they had. That wasn't actually starting a new society, because ultimately they just became part of the larger society. Also, don't forget that it's a work of fiction. But the objectivist case, again, for relatively open borders, stems from the prohibition on the initiation of force. I shouldn't have said prohibition, but the principle that the initiation of force is evil. On what grounds do we have the right to initiate force against somebody who wants to cross a border? Yeah. To physically remove them if they are already here. Furthermore, don't forget that those people are coming here to, say, work. So now you're telling somebody else who they can't hire. You're telling somebody who they can't rent to, who they can't have into their home. So that's why objectivists, I mean, very concisely, generally advocate for a relatively open border system.
Ayn Rand believed the government existed for a single purpose: to render all human relationships voluntary. That is, to exclude coercive force. And if it is not a matter of force, coercive force, it ain't the business of the government. And applying that to immigration is pretty straightforward. On the other hand, what we were talking about earlier is very important. You know, you can go through Ayn Rand's work. She, in a question and answer period, said she was basically in favor of, legal immigration, but there is no Ayn Rand position specifically on immigration. There really isn't. She didn't take it up in her official writings. She didn't, give a full-on answer connected to her. So I don't care who it comes from. I don't care whether it's Leonard Peikoff's position or Harry Binswanger's position or anything in between. That's not objectivism. That's our opinion of what objectivism, being true, implies. So if you're not a threat of force, you have a right to come here. I have a right to employ you. I have a right to have you be here. Both the people already here and the people who want to come here. If there's no threat of force involved, give me the objectivist-based moral reason for excluding people who are peaceful and not a physical threat. I just put it that way. Now, on the other hand, we can have a constitutional debate, and I agree with you 100%. There's no power granted to the federal government to regulate immigration. They just seized that, and the Supreme Court said, well, that's an inherent part of sovereignty, so governments can do it. And notice what happens. Suddenly they create this thing that's outside the constitutional order. And so now do you get if it's a deportation hearing, if you're an alien and you're charged with murder, yes, you get a full-on jury trial. But what about your immigration status? What due process does that require? Just a judge notice hearing. That's it. Because guess what? We don't have all the same due process rights if we're aliens in our deportation matter. What? So you create this thing that exists extra constitutionally, and that means that it's outside of all the other constitutional protections, like in the Fourth and Fifth and Sixth Amendments in the Bill of Rights. You don't get a jury trial, a speedy and public one. You don't get any jury trial on your deportation. So you create this extra constitutional sphere of immigration law, and guess what? The constitutional protections that the framers put in there just don't apply anymore. Now that's the problem. Anyway, all we're doing here is applying the objectivist political theory to the issue of immigration that Ayn Rand did not specifically address, frankly, in her written work.
Not in her written work, but she was asked, I believe, at the Ford Hall Forum about the issue.
Yes.
And she said, what she said is, even if it were true, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote in front of me, even if it were true that immigrants were taking jobs, which they aren't, she said, you don't have a right to a specific job.
Right.
So
what she did is one thing that I guess we can say, if you include her Q&As as part of objectivism.
No, I wouldn't. I generally wouldn't. I'm just saying she did answer the question.
And what she did is she indicated a certain part of the problem that she rejects, the economic argument.
Yes.
She rejects the idea that we, because we're born here, have some special right to the jobs here. That's the kind of argument you'll hear from Trump and Vance every other day. And it is just wrong. There's no special status to me being here, to me having some claim on your resources, the government's resources, or some job. No.
Robert says, remove xenophobia from the equation, and suddenly you've got liberty for citizens who choose to welcome immigrants and immigrants alike. Yeah. A lot of it is just xenophobia. That is
there is
a strong component.
Well, take up the issue of the Somalis in Minnesota. Can you see that there was a welfare fraud, systematic COVID relief fraud that was going on in Minnesota to the tune of maybe $1 billion, and that it was disproportionately being handed out to the Somalis there? Yeah. Well, does that allow you to be bigoted against Somalis in Minnesota? No, it doesn't. But does that stop Mr. Trump from saying Somalis are rotten people and this is a hellhole of a country, and therefore, no, I can evaluate cultures, yes, but when I evaluate individuals, I evaluate individuals. You're not a statistic, Michael. You're an individual. And so even if they found out something about dudes named Liebowitz, I would still have to judge Michael Liebowitz independently from any statistics about Leibowitzes. Leibowitzes are more inclined to go to prison or commit crimes. Well, but let's say someone found some statistic that said Leibowitzes are more or less likely to do X. It would be irrelevant to my judgment of Michael Liebowitz. He's not the group. He's not a statistic. He's not a bell curve spread across anything. He's an individual who has to be judged as an individual. As with each and every Somali out there, Mr. Trump.
Mr. Trump. So speaking of individual rights, how about this this from Reason Magazine, a bipartisan war on prices is coming for your credit card. There's an alliance between democratic socialists and nationalist populists. And Veronica DeRuggi says, it's not a sign of political healing. It's a sign that people have lost their grip on basic economics. They want to cap interest that credit cards can charge. And
Trump will be the first one to join in with the parade.
Sure, he will. Now, first of all, again, it's similar with the immigration. It's an initiation of force where you're violating the rights of people to contract with each other. You have a seller of a product, the credit card company, who these are their terms, and you have a buyer, the consumers, who want them. And now you're going to have the government step in and say, no. But part of the reason there's such high interest rates is to compensate risk, because they're by doing that, they're able to distribute credit cards to more people, because if some people default, they've got enough cushion to
You want to try up credit like that? Put a cap, and in fact, make sure it's like half the interest rate that currently exists.
Yeah. And the next thing,
that, you will dry up credit like that.
And then they'll be bitching about how poor people can't get credit anymore.
Right.
Much like with the housing crisis.
Corporations are denying me my right to credit. No, it's when you put a price cap on anything, expect a shortage of that.
Right. Exactly. If you look at, the Community Reinvestment Act, which said that banks had to loan to high risk borrowers. And then you had the pressure from the White House, George W. Bush with his ownership society. You had Fannie and Freddie telling them they will buy up these risky mortgages. And then the banks loan to the people that are at risk, and then they get accused of predatory lending. So either way, they're screwed. The solution to this is simple. Get the government the frick out. Let people make the deals and enter the agreements that they want to enter into.
Yeah. And allow the free market the flexibility to operate. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And by the way, part of the high rate on credit is the government's fault in the first place. Okay, it's government easy money policy.
Yes,
in the first place. Look,
which the Trumpster's a big fan of.
Yeah, which the Trumpster, he wants those interest rates low. And isn't that disgusting to watch? I mean, the Democrats know that if interest rates go down, there'll be a short sugar high, and they want to deprive Trump of that. When they're in office, they love the sugar high, and and both political parties play this really despicable game. And Trump is joined in with solid enthusiasm in this ridiculous game over loose credit, making me look good in the short run, when it sets us up for a recession, a burst bubble every time, when all of those bad investments have to be liquidated. I know.
Well, what about?
I'm just a parrot for Ayn Rand and Ludwig von Mises. But if I'm going to be a parrot for someone's ideas,
no, but you're handsome too. I got to be honest, Jim. You look. They weren't the best looking pair, Rand and Mises. You are. They had sparkling intellects, but
dazzling.
But lookers. Well, I don't know. Maybe Mises. There's pictures where he looks kind of distinguished in a handsome kind of way.
Yes.
Certainly. I don't think Milton Friedman was it. Well, okay, I digress. But Jim Valliant, you are a prince. Okay, what about this guy coming back? He's a naturalized citizen, and he's coming back from another country, and he gets seized up by the what the hell is this? The CBP, whatever the hell they are. They're
Customs and Border Patrol.
Yeah, Customs and Border Patrol. What are your thoughts on this? It goes back to similarly to the same thing we've just been discussing with the immigration, right?
Right. Citizens, look, if you're going to do mass deportations, citizens are going to get caught up in it. If you plan on deporting millions of people, that means, even if you're really, really good and efficient, surely that means dozens, hundreds, probably thousands of wrongful detentions are going to happen. When it comes to bank robbery or residential burglary, I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to say, okay, we might sometimes detain the wrong guy when we're investigating an armed robbery. Okay, well, it's worth it to get the guy. Now, they're not going to keep him in custody very long. And that's the other thing. Immigration laws are so screwed up, they can, in effect, hold you in federal custody for long periods of time. See, it's something extra constitutional. So the regular rules of the Bill of Rights that would apply in any other civil or criminal trial context don't apply in the immigration context. So yeah, we have a screwed up immigration legal system that doesn't afford people the correct due process. One, two, and boy, is that glaringly apparent in this case. But two, if people are going to be doing mass deportations, even if you say, well, I'm just going for the criminals, guess what's going to happen? You are going to detain U.S. citizens, and it will be wrong, and it's screwed up. And so how many innocent people being indefinitely detained because it's the immigration system are we willing to put up with in order to deport millions of people? Trump has no problem with, look, to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, is the way they're going to look at it.
I got to tell you something. I was just getting ready to excoriate Pellegrino because I see he's posting on Twitter and I'm saying, but he didn't share this. And then I saw he did. So
okay.
I calmed down. But there was a question here earlier, and I'm glad I found it, from Race Jacobson. What do you guys think about the executive order Trump made blocking state level anti-AI regulations? This, I am not a fan of executive orders, first of all, but I don't know that states, given that AI is a part of commerce, I don't even know under an original interpretation of the Constitution if states have the right to do this. It's out of my area of knowledge, but that's my initial impression.
Yeah, and for the federal jurisdiction to swamp local jurisdiction, they have to have a law. In other words, Congress needs to take some action, taking it away from the states. Does that make sense? Otherwise, I think that and this is screwed up. Talk about effed up reality. Under our current constitutional system, the states are the ones with the open-ended, undefined powers. And so the normal police power of the state would, if you believe that the state has a right to engage in economic regulation, I think that we're interpreting the Constitution all wrong. So I would limit the states in much more profound ways than the current Supreme Court does, even under our current Constitution. And I wouldn't even need to, in my view, go outside the Constitution to constrict states and their ability to do that. The Dormant Commerce Clause by itself might be argued here, but I don't see how. This is much more like a safety type of regulation, I would imagine, where people would say, no, it's really the safety of people. Say the safety of teenage boys who are getting, what is the term now? Sextortion, right?
What?
What is the phrase?
I never heard that before. That's the thing?
Yeah. Teenage boys lured into sending pictures of themselves to creepy older men are then being blackmailed by those creepy older men online. And so they're using this as a justification for regulating the internet. And if you add AI into that, you say, well, AI is encouraging people to commit violence, or AI is encouraging teenagers to kill themselves, et cetera, then we need to protect children. And of course, that's the camel's nose under the tent. Got to protect the children. So to protect the children, we'll have some state law that restricts AI. I don't see, under the current understanding of the Dormant Commerce Clause, states, I think, can regulate it until and unless the federal government comes in to preempt them with jurisdiction using their power to regulate interstate commerce. It's screwed up how they understand the scope of Interstate Commerce Clause power. That is for sure. And they've changed it radically over what the framers intended, no doubt about it. But and the original intention of the Commerce Clause was to do just that, to take away from states the power to interfere with interstate commerce. But this would seem to me to be an intrastate issue of police power under existing law.
What do you think about AI in general, Jim?
I think it's a great thing. I think it's going to enormously increase productivity, and it already is. It already is enormously increasing productivity. My God, if it helps a doctor do diagnosis, if it helps someone do research, I mean, even say ancient history research, look at all this and give me a summary of it from this standpoint. What an amazing tool. And all of us can think of the applications: law, medicine, business, engineering, you name it. There's all kinds, and it'll dramatically, just as the great tech innovations of my lifetime have each time dramatically increased the productivity of labor. But of course, government borrowing and spending and inflation has sucked so much of the value of that, so that the wealth gains of that huge productivity advance, I mean, if it weren't for advances in technology, given government policy over my lifetime, we'd be an impoverished third world country at this point, it would seem to be.
Yeah, I've seen AI be, the Grok and ChatGPT be very inaccurate at times.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, when I ask them to analyze podcast episodes I've done or debates I've had, I find that it does a very good job.
When I say it's a great thing, what I'm saying, it's a great thing if you remain an active intellect yourself. You can't let it substitute you for your thinking. And when you do that, when you just churn out something that was AI generated as your work, my essay on this point, because you gave it the parameters, that's not writing, that's not thinking. You're letting it substitute for your thinking. And I think, sure, every step of technology, while it may make the world better in many, many other ways, it'll open up certain dangers. Before the automobile, did we have automobile crashes? No. But we had horse and buggy crashes, and they were more likely to be fatal. But the point is, though, if we replace the horse and buggy with a car, are we opening up new avenues for potential harm? Absolutely. Absolutely. AI, are there dangers, risks? Should we be cautious about it? Absolutely. But again, that's no justification for government regulation. I can do my own thinking for myself, thank you. I will evaluate the results of AI, and every individual and every business in this country should be free to do the same. Now, do I think AI should be plugged in and control nuclear weapons? No. Human beings should be in charge of something like that to avoid the Terminator sci-fi scenario of, artificial intelligence taking over the planet. We're nowhere near there yet. But do I think that, the human mind should be unplugged and we should plug in AI for all of our decisions? No, that would be dangerous. Certainly not issues of, say, military kind. But within those broad parameters, I'm not afraid of AI. It's a wonderful thing. It'll advance human productivity.
I would love to drive around in a horse and buggy with Jim. Next time I'm out in Cali, maybe we got to do that. We'll go rent one and zip around.
My wife inherited from her dad a buggy whip from the old.
Come on.
And it's a really cool thing, really.
All right. So we need you now, Jim, to give the capitalist thought of the day, because we are approaching our denouement.
Denouement.
That's how to pronounce it, really?
Yeah, denouement. It's from the French.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You got to put the French accent to the French origin word. How shall we summarize today? Force is the problem, ladies and gentlemen. And you cannot use tradition, you cannot use religion to inform your use of force. That is inconsistent with capitalism. Ultimately, capitalism requires, and I'm just going to say it's going to offend everybody, it requires it requires that we devote ourselves to reason as the only tool for understanding and knowing. And anything that's inconsistent with that, including religion and faith, is going to lead down a dark path. And the American right, in trying to compromise with religion, in trying to resolve the inconsistency between classical liberalism and traditional religious views, has utterly betrayed capitalism and moved in a direction of fascism and socialism as a result. I'm going to put the blame square on traditionalist religious people. Ayn Rand once said that Christianity is the perfect kindergarten for communism, and she was right. We have to reject the traditional morality of Christianity if we ever hope to defend capitalism, just as we have to defend the profit motive. And in a sense, a kind of selfishness, or we're never going to get ahead of this issue. We're never going to get a grip. Ayn Rand, again, nailed it perfectly. Capitalism cannot be sustained by using the faith, family, tradition model. Swamp.
Robert Nacer with the super fucking chat. Good show. Gentlemen, have an outstanding weekend. Robert, you as well.
Yeah.
The question is to go to YouTube and answer it, and please go and answer this question. The question is, how will you be spending your weekend? That's all I want to know. Don't write a treatise, just a little concise description of what you're going to be doing this weekend.
So it's like the teacher, what I did on my summer vacation?
Similar, yes.
What are you going to do this weekend?
Yes, please answer that question on YouTube. Helps with the algorithm. And remember, 2:30 today, Eastern Time, this very channel, I'll be live with Everyday Ethics.
What a great show.
Oh, I think so, too.
You are knocking it out of the park, Mr. Liebowitz.
Thank you. Jim, thank you so much for joining us here today. And audience, thank you. Love you all. Have a great weekend.